So from compliance to confident, navigating AI in financial services, balancing innovation, and SEC expectations. My name is Larry Meador. I'm the channel chief with Cavelo, and today we've brought together a panel of experts who are a wealth of knowledge in all of these areas. They are experts that are in the trenches. They're balancing innovation, governance, and the growing stack of SEC guidance that's coming our way. And we're going to dig into the risk, the blind spots, the success stories, and yes, the reality that managing AI is not just as easy as flipping a switch. Let me begin by introducing our experts today. We have Eldon Sprickerhoff over here to my left. He is the strategic advisor and growth architect at Caledon Ventures, but he's probably best known by many of us in the industry as the co-founder of eSentire. And next to Eldon, we have Chris Turek, who is the former CIO at Evercore, which was an investment banking advisory firm. So we're glad to have you here today as well. Then next to Chris, we have Vinod Paul, who is the president of managed services at Align, which is here in New York City. And then next to Vinod, we have James Mignacca, who is the founder and CEO of Cavelo, and also my boss. So we're going to have some fun today talking with these gentlemen, and I can guarantee you I'm going to learn a whole lot. So let's set the stage here and talk about readiness and regulatory pressure. So let's kick things off with a look at the broader landscape right now. So with regulatory scrutiny intensifying and AI adoption accelerating, the pressure is building on a lot of folks. Let's start by understanding where financial firms stand today when it comes to AI readiness and compliance, particularly in the eyes of the SEC. So Vinod, the first question I've got here, do you feel most financial firms are truly ready for SEC scrutiny on AI usage and cyber disclosures?
Yeah, to be completely transparent, I would say most firms are not ready. What we've seen, we support about 350 clients globally. And when clients are engaging with us or we have new prospects engaging with us, there's just a lot of confusion. Everyone's excited about AI. And AI is exciting, all the products and innovation that's occurring, very exciting to everyone, but it's very much the Wild West out there. And so, quite often we'll engage a new prospect and say, okay, what levels of AI are you leveraging now? And they'll say, oh, we're not using any AI. We'll go do a survey and we'll realize very quickly that they have users at the firm that are using ChatGPT or using even nuanced parts of products that exist within their ecosystem where they're leveraging the chat AI bot at the organization and feeding in confidential information. So for us, what we've come to find out very quickly is it's the Wild West. Firms are not ready, and they need to really take a step back to understand, okay, what do I want to achieve out of AI? But more importantly, how do I do it confidentially? How do I make sure I stay within regulation, as well as how do I deal with the future challenges that are going to occur, right? Because as soon as you start feeding it information, you need to make sure that you have data integrity, that you have, one repercussion that we saw recently was a firm had the right policy. They had all the individuals that said, okay, you're allowed to use AI, but one individual was actually feeding their AI bot a lot of confidential information that other employees shouldn't have known even. So, as a whole, I would answer firms are not ready, but they're now starting to understand the implications of it.
Good stuff, good stuff. And by the way, gentlemen, I like to have kind of a conversational type approach to these things. So if anybody has anything they want to add, feel free to jump in. But with that said, James.
I will jump in.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I thought your question was interesting. I think you framed it as, are firms ready for scrutiny from regulators like the SEC? I would ask the question, are the regulators even ready yet? I think it's very hard to be ready for scrutiny when this is such a quickly evolving industry and technology that I doubt many of the regulators are even fairly confident what they should be asking, how they should be asking it. So how do you get ready for that exam if you don't even know what the questions are?
You don't know what the questions are.
Right, and they're going to change in 6 months as a new version comes out or a new capability. So to Vinod's point of it being the wild, wild west, I think that's doubly true because your regulators, auditors, even consultants, everybody's sort of struggling and evolving with the times.
Correct.
Tomorrow is certainly going to look a lot different than yesterday when it comes to AI.
I'd like to just go back to a story from 2005. Chris and I shared an office, and we were actually involved in an SEC audit of a client of ours back in the day. And they came in, and the request from the auditor was, give me all your email on a disk. And Chris and I looked at each other and we're like, wow, these guys don't even understand that, that's not even physically attainable.
Yep.
And, I would say that absolutely agree with Chris. I don't believe the regulators are ready because, they may not be educated enough or know what are the right questions to ask.
No, I think that's a great point. And, having been in the channel as long as I have been, I have to assume that it's going to be firms like yours that are probably going to be way more advanced than the regulators are. So you're going to know more stuff than they do, and you may end up having to teach the regulators about some of these things.
And that's a very common occurrence. And this isn't a knock on the regulators, but I think, I can tell you from being a practitioner for, almost 20 years, we generally had a great back and forth relationship with auditor, examiners, and regulators, and helped them understand, what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing things, and helping them understand, this is an acceptable practice, or this is the right way to do things. And sometimes that was an education where we'd spend a couple hours walking them through a policy or our thought process. And, sometimes they'd push back and say, we'd love to see add or change something to that. But I think, it's working hand in hand with them that really makes that work. And again, back to AI, it's changing so rapidly, that's just difficult to do right now.
Right. It truly is. And James, you talk with a lot of firms. So what's the common thread that you're hearing when it comes to AI readiness in financial organizations?
So one of the topics of conversation is there going to be a regulatory compliance just for AI? And from chatter and talking to folks that I know, I think what's going to happen is AI is going to be just another potential risk in your organization. If you think about the regulatory compliance today, it's very much discover and then understand what's acceptable in your organization. And that's the executive team as much as the regulatory compliance, and making sure that you understand and are aware what your employees are using. I'll point out one other thing that we don't talk about enough, your vendors are using, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I find interesting is now Copilot is enabled right outside, like just enabled by default. We don't talk about the fact that, the new iPhone is going to have it enabled in their chip. So the reality is you're never going to get away from AI. I think Chris said it best, is like, it is rapidly growing and we have no choice but to adopt it. Companies have no choice but to adopt it. And it's just another means to risk, and understanding what the risk tolerance is for the organization is the starting point. I've talked to CIOs who are adamant that they're going to block AI. I don't think that's realistic. I really don't. I think you got to be pragmatic when it comes to this. And then there's going to be, regulatory compliance will always be delayed, but I actually think that best practice is something that every firm should try to instill. And so when it comes to your cybersecurity practice, understanding what's acceptable, but understanding how, like the cause and effect. So with Copilot, what does it really mean when you enable it? Like truly, what does it mean? And there's so much misconfiguration. They flip the switch, they don't understand, information's everywhere. And then I talk about this. We haven't seen vulnerabilities related to the Copilot yet. But imagine a bad actor, if they want to go and find one spot where there's a lot of information, wouldn't I go after the AI engine in an organization? Is literally the family jewels, right? And you can go there. So, I think that we're just seeing the start of how it's going to evolve, and it's going to be an ongoing discussion for many, 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 many years. Mm-hmm. And I think we just need to be pragmatic and incorporate AI into our best practice, and not look at it as something that is different. Like it's just another risk vector in your organization.
Any other comments?
Oh, wow. So one of the things I think that it's really, you need to define, like, what does AI mean to your company?
Right.
And have the most judicious use, whether it's local models, and get a sense as to what you're putting into it. What are you hoping to achieve with it? I think, some of the concerns that I've seen, to James's point, where, you put a whole company's worth of information in there, and suddenly everyone has access to the same information, whether or not it's needed to be there. So you've got this, this situation now where, if there's been financial documents that go into an LLM you're going to use for querying, that the most junior employee now has access to that, and it's not regulated, and you can't easily unring that bell, especially if it's a model that you don't support and own yourself. So there's the exciting gold rush moment where you can do all this querying with this incredibly powerful tool that suddenly there's a downside to it as well, and it's difficult after the fact to put restrictions and guardrails into place.
Without a doubt. And this one I'm going to just kind of ask to the whole panel here. Regulatory pressure is going to continue to build, and how do you see that this is going to shape the best practices that James was talking about in cybersecurity, data practices, different things like that? I mean, what's your crystal ball look like? How is it going to help shape some of this stuff?
I think, in my experience, it's going to be something that happens on the news. Something will happen on the news, and then the regulatory compliance will jump in. Because here's the thing, and I know everyone here can relate to this. Regulatory compliance has always been, historically has been a checkbox, right? Let's just get through it, right? Let's do the paperwork. And I think now it's changing from checkbox to really let's operationalize this. And I hope that's the case, because that's really what regulatory compliance should be for. And I think what's going to take place is there's going to be some kind of breach of some sort that we're going to hear about, and then you're going to see this hyper focus on, what do we need to do, and then it's going to calm down, right? Because like anything, and then they're going to put the proper means, and we'll learn from it. We don't know what we don't know currently, right? There hasn't been a major breach when it comes to LLMs or when it comes to any kind of even Copilot. And I said this before, there's been one vulnerability that I'm aware of, and it wasn't catastrophic, right? You wait. There's gonna be something. And once that happens,
James, I think
maybe it's already there.
That was gonna be my point of, think about some of the biggest, worst breaches we had. How long did it take for us to figure it out?
Thank you.
There hasn't been one that's been disclosed or somebody's
very
figured
fair.
out yet, but it's very possible that nation states are already taking advantage of.
It's absolutely nation state, very effective.
So the first time that the SEC looked at cybersecurity was right after the Target breach. So that was the Target breach was just in, I think it was November, December, and then by April, mid-April, they'd put out the 28 questions, and it was their MO was to, we're going to do it was 28 questions asking funds, what are they doing with respect to cybersecurity? And it was not prescriptive, right? It was an information ask. Mm-hmm. So that's how they would gather that information. Rather than make assumptions, they would just do a sort of a blanket request for information. Let's find out what everybody's doing, and then we'll take that data back and do a meta-analysis on it, and then start working through the regulatory framework. What would that look like, and what's enforceable, what makes sense for small groups, for large groups, and everything in between. So that is exactly what's happened in the past, and history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vinod.
You completely agree with my colleagues here. I will say, regulation as well as investor due diligence, though, go hand in hand. So I run operational due diligence on behalf of our clients. Yeah. So even though the regulators are not caught up, I will tell you the operational due diligence side of things, the investors are getting more sophisticated, and they do understand the risks as well as the nuances of AI. And typical week, we are in investor meeting, at least once or twice a week. And the questions that we started getting, especially in the last 6 months, the investors are getting educated and they're asking the right questions. Fundamentally, do you have an AI policy? We want to see that policy. What's ensuring that your employees are adhering to this policy? So even though I would say the regulators are catching up or getting more educated, I would say that the investor due diligence side of things, that I would say that community is actually a little bit ahead of the curve.
I was going to
which
say
is-
outpacing them, yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm excited about that because we embrace the operational due diligence journey with our clients, and for our when we engage with our clients, we're like, hey, you have to start thinking about this because we've seen 5 very sophisticated ODDs where they're asking lines from a similar thread of AI questions. So that community is absolutely going to change, I think, and help the regulators.
No,
become
this
a
is
stable.
fantastic. Great info.
So one point I think it's worth making is if you really take a step back from this and think about the questions that you're asking and the responses and how people are thinking about this, at a very simple level, it comes down to risk, right? If we think about what's the role of, let's say, the chair of the audit committee of a public company to manage risk? What's a CISO's primary responsibility to manage risk to the firm? The CFO, probably the same thing. What are the regulators trying to do? They want to ensure that you're managing risks so that your investors aren't there's no harm there. And so, while sometimes people make the regulators out to be the bad guys, or maybe it's the investor DDQ that you're worried about, fundamentally we're all talking about the same thing: it's managing risk.
Right.
I think where there's a deviation is when you take a tactical need. I need to respond to a regulator or an auditor or a DDQ, and that's a one-time thing. To James's point, sometimes you're looking to check the box, and I think instead of fighting that, people need to embrace the fact that a regulator can't shut you down. You could be very secure and shut down by a regulator, or you can be very insecure and pass an audit.
Right.
What you need to appreciate is that there's 2 things happening simultaneously. Strategically, we need to make sure that we're managing risk, and I think everybody wants to do that. Sometimes you get caught up in the moment of, well, I need to pass this exam, so I'm going to do these things, and then people feel like, I'm done. A very brilliant colleague of mine once said, I'm very frustrated because when we talk to people, it seems like they think security is a project and that we're going to be done. And I think you can translate that very directly right now to AI and say, we're not going to do something and then say, okay, we've managed our risk for AI, we're done. And so thinking about how you build a program that manages that forever, every day, every minute, every second, that's the right way to think of that. And then if you do that correctly, part of that program should be able to respond to a DDQ or a regulator or an examiner or maybe even something internally that happens. And that's how you really get in front of that. But unfortunately, when people are reactive and they don't think about this, then they get a subpoena, or then they get an audit request, or then they get something from an investor, they scramble. And then they make bad decisions, and then they think, well, I'm done because I got through that investor DDQ, on to the next thing. And
Let's go to the, yeah.
Right. So it's important, I think, to understand why we're doing this and make sure that you have the right roles that are empowered inside of the company to manage that risk, and then you'll have a good outcome.
So what do you think are some of the top blind spots that organizations are missing when it comes to deploying tools like Copilot or ChatGPT or any of the others that are out there?
So personally, I think the biggest blind spot that firms have is data. And so, if you think about it, we have a lot of CEOs going on the news and saying, "Oh, we're gonna replace 50% of our developers or 50% of our legal clerks or help desk or whatever your position is." Well, I actually have a question. Why haven't they? Right. So, are you a bad CEO? So you're saying this is going to happen, but you haven't done it yet.
Right.
Well, why not? Is it because the models aren't good enough? But it seems like the models are pretty impressive, right? Why? And the why, I think, is really the data. When you go to any firm, I was speaking to a recruiter the other day, and I said, "Hey, what's the hottest position?" He said, "Data engineers." Why? Because you got to get the data into a position where these AI tools can use it. You could build an AI tool where you say, "Hey, let's dump all the company's data in it." That'd be great. Except the only person who could use it would be the CEO, because he's the only person who can see every piece of data in the firm. And I hope he has better things to do than sit in front of a AI tool and answer questions for everybody in the firm. And so understanding, well, what data, I think Eldon brought it up before, or maybe it was Vinod, right? If you put sensitive information into an AI tool, you actually ruin the tool. Because now you say, well, nobody can ask you questions because we don't know if it's answering that question based on this private information. So you have to engineer that data in a way where you're confident, all right, anything that goes into that can come out of that, and all these people can use it. And then you have subsets. And so it's really managing that data that is what is holding a lot of these people back from why they haven't said, okay, we're gonna do all these great things with AI. Well, why not, right? Are you just lazy? Are you a bad CEO? No, it's because your data's not in the right spot yet. And that is very challenging. And that's why this isn't going to be done in 6 months. It's going to be a longer journey. But to your point, I think people are talking about AI, they're not talking about data, and that's what they should be talking about.
Yep, absolutely.
In terms of blind spots, I think Eldon will agree with me here. What's the biggest cybersecurity threat out there? It's people, right? Out of our experiences.
We are the weakest link.
And I would say the biggest blind spot is really the employee base. And we have an interesting lens. We work with 85% of our clients are registered investment advisors and some of the top global hedge funds and private equity firms of the world. This summer, that collective group hired about 400 interns that, some of the brightest individuals out there coming from the best universities. Day one, when we were onboarding these users on behalf of our clients, we were like, have you made sure that your interns know what your AI policies are? Because what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to be like, they're going to get a project. Hey, look at this data or do research on this. What are they going to do? They're going to feed it right into ChatGPT.
They're going to do what college trained them to do, right?
Exactly.
Use ChatGPT to do their homework for them.
Exactly. I have kids in college now. That's what college is training them to do. Use the tools, throw it right into ChatGPT, see what the outcome is. And so right away, that's immediate risk. So I would say people is the blind spot. Are they being educated to use the tool properly in the confines that you're supposed to use it in?
Great stuff. James, Eldon, anything to add to this?
So Chris kind of talked about this, but I think it's important to understand the use case that you're going to use AI, Copilot, whatever it is for. And it's the cause and effect. Like at the end of the day, are you really trying to replace employees? Chances are you're not. You probably want to enhance them, have them work on more high touch stuff. I believe this is going to augment the employees that we have today. And I'll echo one thing that you talked about, the data piece. And it's so true. At the end of the day, what people don't realize, everyone's scared, AI is going to take everyone's job away. And maybe it will in certain segments, but you still need humans. The humans are just going to train it. And at the end of the day, we also need to stop thinking that we're just going to, we're in this weird marketing AI. Everyone's talking about AI. We're going to just implement it. It's the cool thing to do, right? Everyone's talking about it. It's not going to be like that. We're going to use it for specific use cases to scale. I don't think it's going to be used for replacing. And then to answer kind of the question at hand here, I think that the challenge is it's so new, we don't understand what we don't know. And I'm going to spin this a little bit. What scares me personally is not the employees using it, although I appreciate what you've just said. It's the employees who are going to be, it's the vector of using AI, the bad actors using AI. Social engineering has always been, you can look at the email with your eyes and be like, that's not right. It's going to become much smarter. It's going to know who you are. It's going to scrub the internet to say, I know who James Mignacca is. I know where you live. The emails are going to be very sophisticated, and that's where things change and the dynamics change when it comes to using AI. So I've kind of changed it a little bit using the bad actor side, but I think there's multiple different ways you can look at this.
I think the last piece is if you don't give someone an outlet to use AI, they will find a way. Just like the internet routes around damage. There'll be shadow IT that no one knows, but shadow AI. And DeepSeek as a model, you can just download it. I can run Llama 7B on a MacBook, and it's not the fastest thing to run, but it's very effective. And so if you don't give someone an outlet to use this tooling that's available, you're going to find that people will route around that because they consider it damage, and they will find a way to use the tooling one way or the other.
I think that's a really good point because at the end of the day, they will use it. And if you're not allowing them to use it in a structured manner, they could use anything. You use the Wild West. There's this scary kind of theory about how you can poison the LLM engine. Bad actors can slightly change it to change the outcome. So if you have employees that are just using whatever it is that they have access to, that's the scary part, right? So if you're pragmatic in your organization, you say this is acceptable, this isn't. You give that outlet, right? You have somewhat control and you understand kind of the guardrails versus the Wild West that you talked about.
And I think it's important to note, and while obviously I understand where Eldon was coming from, why he said it, because I saw this where firms are trying to block ChatGPT or other things. Let's just take a step back and think of how ridiculous that is.
Yeah.
This is probably the greatest technical innovation that mankind has ever had. And you're going to block it? We have other problems and issues to talk about if your approach to AI is, let's block it. Like, let me see if I can short your stock, right? Like, I think, so how to use it? We should be encouraging everyone to use it, because to Eldon's point, they're going to use it anyways, right? And if they're not going to use it, they're probably not going to be, when we talk about, the people who are going to get laid off and replaced by AI,
Exactly.
It's those people, right? And so we want to encourage that. It's the how. It goes back to the program. If you have people who are thinking every day, all the time, how do we do this? How do we grow? How do we learn from yesterday? How do we not make that same mistake tomorrow? That's how you're successful, but that has to be continuous. And I think that's the problem, is people look at it and say, oh, how do I deploy this? That's the wrong way to think about it, right? It's how do we use this forever? How do we build a program to be successful with the use of that tool?
Right. No, very valid point. Glad you brought that up. Identifying risk is really only half the battle. I think the next step is to build strong internal controls and governance to help manage AI responsibly. So Vinod, what internal controls have you, or governance mechanisms, have been most effective for you at Align?
So our strategy with our clients is very simple, right? It's first education, right? Making sure our clients understand the power of AI as well as the risks associated. Then it's putting policy together around, what's the strategy going to be? Okay, we're gonna leverage AI. This is going to be our strategy, and we help educate them on here are the technical controls that you can put in place. But also, it's just showing them the value of the tool, right? For the majority of our clients that are leveraging AI, they're using it within the Microsoft ecosystem, Copilot. So we're just showing them, hey, this is how we can put governance around the AI policy that we'll put together as an organization with, us as your technology advisor and you with your strategy of what you want to do for your firm, melding those together and then deploying it out and making sure that this isn't something that you just put away, as Chris mentioned. There's constant innovation happening with AI.
Right.
There are new tools coming out on a daily basis. I get excited to I follow a video blog that talks about the new AI tools, and on a daily basis, there's a new feature or a new tool out there. So for us, the AI journey with our clients, it's a constant journey. That journey is never going to end. There is no destination that we're going to reach. It's all about that journey. So for us, we're educating, we're helping them implement the tools, but then the hard part is that ongoing innovation and education of how the landscape is changing. And as Chris mentioned, I think earlier, it's if you feed a bad data, you can get bad results, right? So governance is so important, but innovation and that constant journey, I think, is really important. So that's how we've been able to tackle it with our clients, especially over the last 24 months. I would tell you that there's no silver bullet out there, as I'm sure everyone here would agree. But it's about, I think, the strategy that you take upon yourself, and we are seeing our clients embrace it. Some clients are like, "Oh, I wanted to do a lot more." It will do a lot more. It's just having that patience to get there.
Does it take a lot of convincing and talking to your clients to get them to embrace this? Or
we have extremes. We have extremes. And I think it's also their background and what they've come from. Some of our clients are very analytical, and for them, they see AI as a benefit. No one is out there saying, I'm going to replace my employees. Instead, their strategy has been, okay, how do we redeploy those employees to do smarter things for the organization? How can we give them the tools to make it more efficient, to give them some quality of life,
Precisely.
or to make our organization a stronger organization?
If I could, you were asking a question around what have we seen from success at governance, and I think Eldon brought up a really great point prior that I think is illustrative of this. Is if you don't let people use it, they're going to find a way. They're going to use it regardless. And so when you think about as you're putting together your governance program, it has to be measured. And by measured, I don't mean super conservative. I mean you have to allow people to use it. To Eldon's point, they're going to anyway. And so I would say if you're very risk adverse in your firm, understand that by denying people it, you're probably taking a bigger risk than you are in giving them an outlet to use it successfully. And to allow people to use it, you need diversity. And I don't mean this in a racial sense. I mean, you need to get compliance, legal, IT, security, finance in the business all together in a room. And probably HR, because there's many times there's HR implications of this, of what does our program look like, so that you can, some of the people, we had some older lawyers who were very hesitant about this. And as we convinced them to get on our AI risk committee, they were super excited. So, I'm learning a ton about this, how much I can use it. And then they start coming back with ideas. That's really where success is going to come in governance, is getting all the facets of your business represented on a committee, mandating that a committee figures out how to enable the business to use it. Not how to stop it, but actually how to use that. And then if you have the right people in the room and you give them the proper training and support, the program, as we said before, it's going to be ongoing, it's going to go forever, but that'll enable this, get that snowball to start rolling down the hill and pick up the momentum you need.
Nope, absolutely. That's a fantastic point. Anybody else have anything they want to follow up with on that?
No, I think you guys covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's kind of shift from reactive and talk about being proactive. So as AI continues to evolve, so do the opportunities, but also so do the threats, especially in cybersecurity, obviously. So I kind of want to just quiz you guys and find out what you think the future is going to look like. So
haven't you seen Terminator?
I have, what is it, Skynet and all that fun stuff. And
who knew it was an instructional video?
Yeah, exactly. Or what's well, I'm not going to go down there. But so James, how does Cavelo help customers move from reactive to proactive in this space?
So I'll do this twofold. I'm gonna continue the conversation that Chris had around risk. I think that one of the challenges is you're never going to be 100% secure in AI, whatever it might be. There's never going to be, if you're on the internet, there's going to be a potential risk of a data breach or whatever it might be. The reality is, in today's world, there's so many facets that bad actors can potentially do bad things. And so instead of looking at things in a one-dimensional view like we used to, which would be, for example, patch everything, which is not realistic, or we used to do access controls, lock down certain machines. It's really hard. But if you look at things in a two-dimensional view of where's your riskiest assets in your organization, and change the remediation around those riskier assets versus looking at things in the one-dimensional view of trying to do it for everyone, I think that's the future, right?
It's like a triage.
It's a triage, but it's also, you really got to understand in your organization, where's your riskiest assets? So for example, it might be Vinod and his, where he just has access to all the customer information, right? By design, which is perfectly fine, and he needs it for his job. But at the end of the day, someone in his organization who has access to no sensitive data, you might decide, hey, we're going to do different remediation for Vinod versus this other person. For example, it could be daily versus weekly versus monthly. And so I look at it like, you're basically plugging the holes where you believe that there could be the bigger potential risk, right? And then at the same time, when it comes to specifically AI, I'm going to pick one use case when it comes to, and we kind of talked about it when it comes to, enabling Copilot. Boom, everyone has access to the data. what we've done is we created an AI readiness report, and basically what it does is it says, okay, based off of the data that you have and the permissions that you have in your organization, what data will that AI engine have access to? And is that data something that you want all your employees to have access to? So the one example would be my CFO sends me a spreadsheet with all of my employees' salary information, right? And they, instead of inherently changing the permissions, it's copy URL, sends it to me through Teams or whatever message app I'm using. I click on it, and I call that the lazy way, which we're all guilty of. And basically what happens is you enable AI or Copilot for this example, and all of a sudden any employee can go and look up what's James Mignacca's salary, right? And that's scary because they don't understand that. And so what we do is we will help with that report to say, this is the data that AI has, so Copilot has ingested. This is the permission model. If you want to change it, this is how you do it. On top of that, configuration. Like, did you know you can disable the feature to copy the URL? Like that's an option, right? And so what we do is with our configuration management module, we'll give you best practice configuration based off of Copilot, and you can go out and make those changes.
Can I jump in? Because I think
Absolutely.
from being a practitioner for so long, and obviously I've worked with James and have seen Cavelo grow over the years, and I think James was nice enough to give me a demo of his latest release just a couple days ago, and it blew me away. I think at the simplest level, you're able to allow people to manage their risk. Now, a huge part of that obviously is AI, but you're literally giving somebody a score. And you're saying, hey, the reason why you got the score is, right? You have data over here, that data sensitive, it's going to this AI model, or it's accessed by somebody over here. That person's coming from a machine that's misconfigured or isn't patched or updated. Like, it's a very complete view. Now, it's not perfect because nothing could be, but it's the most comprehensive and complete view in the industry I've seen of risk, where you can say, as a CISO or as a head of risk, where is the risk in my firm when we're using AI? And what's better than a number and a score, right? So for somebody who doesn't really have the ability to get into the weeds, I think it does a great job of being able to say, hey, at a high level, here's the different components that you should think about when you think about risk. And you can even drill into it a little to say, well, why are we more riskier today than we were yesterday? Oh, well, this person just got all this access to this thing, or somebody changed the configuration on their endpoint, or they uploaded all this data into an LLM model. To me, again, all this comes back to we're responsible for managing risk. So how do you do that? I think right now there's so many people who are asked to do this, and I don't want to say they're doing a bad job. I think there's people who inherently can juggle a lot of things in their head, but like, what happens when that person's on vacation? Right? So now you've got a CISO who's probably doing a good job of understanding all that risk in their head, but can they communicate that effectively to the audit committee? Are they in every single meeting that's happening? But if you have a tool where you can walk people through it and say, okay, we're not here, you can get the report tomorrow. You can see if something changed. You can drill into that report. It's not a panacea, but to be able to have that level of granularity to understand risk, I think is a very, very compelling use case. And to be clear, it's not just AI, because your risk isn't just AI, but the product's evolved as AI's come in and become a bigger piece of it. You're looking at how that disproportionately AI is getting to be a bigger piece of risk, and I think that's fantastic.
Yep, I agree. Thanks, Chris.
So, Chris, you brought up earlier, this is probably the biggest revolution that any of us hopefully will see in our lifetime, right? So, Eldon, you've seen security evolve through major waves during your time here in the industry. How do you feel AI is different from past disruptions?
So it's the way I look at it is we've sort of democratized availability. And so that, a nation state has, infinite resources almost to do attacks. But with this new capabilities, you've basically funded anyone with ill intent, that they suddenly got this seed round that they could they could work with it however they want, that they can just spend immediately, quickly. What James was saying about the custom malware that gets created. I think what we will end up seeing is that sort of agentic swarm of agents from attackers that say, I have different tasks. There's a company that I want to go after. I would like to get everything you can tell me about the CEO, everything you can tell me about his family and his or her spouse, and so they go off and do that piece. Now give me every piece of data dump that I can have about credentials about this company. Come back, and I would like to go through everything on Reddit that refers to this company. Now I would like to make a custom piece of malware, given all of that information and where people post, what websites they typically go to, where is their email hosted. And I would like to have a curated attack vector, and just make that run out. Give me that information. Who are the last 20 employees that were hired? What information can you give me? Go into Zoom Info, right? Have a Zoom Info account so you get every piece of information that is about that. I would like to automate that whole thing, curated, and then do it to thousands of companies, and constantly have this sort of swarm access, or a vector, or very customized, curated, always being updated, right? Given the information that is out there, that is inevitable and inexpensive, right? And this did not exist 5 years ago, without a lot of effort and with nation state sort of level attack. Given the newest vectors that I can buy out there, and I know they're using the Google Suite or Microsoft M365 or any of this stuff. I would like a curated attack set up and decide when I want to launch that. And so we have this other piece, so how do you defend against a swarm of ill intent? Well, you have to have your own swarm of defense that comes into place, which is, I need to find out every piece of information new piece of information that comes on, right? And you warn, when you get a new employee, you said in 2 days, you will get, a text from the CEO asking for something. And right now, that is, Apple gift cards or, Amazon gift cards. That is right now. The next step is more information, right? I need that report, or I'm going to send you this report, this Excel file. I need you to whatever that vector is, what they can divine from the net, a custom curated with that tone, whether it's it's an audio piece or a video piece, whatever that looks like. This is inevitable. And so you've got to get a better sense as to what data is out there on the net by every vector, and have people ready for that response. And proactively, it may have a piece where you have you put in incorrect information that's only seen by LLMs that can poison that well. So the people wouldn't necessarily see it themselves, but the LLMs that are with ill intent have bad information. That's obvious to humans, but not to an LLM. So that sort of swarm versus swarm scenario, I expect we will see this in the next year.
Can you imagine? So typically, one of the processes that I see with a lot of companies is, before any wire transfer, call the CEO or CFO up just to double check, make sure you have email, and then it's usually a phone call. Imagine the voice of the CFO being approved, send it right now, this is important. That's the trust piece that you talked about earlier.
Or before it gets, I'm calling you in advance,
Yeah.
to let you know, right? You don't initiate it but you'll recognize me. I was like, I'm making this call. It's good.
100% agree with these guys. Let's go back, to a recent innovation that happened, earlier with the .com boom, right? What happened during that time? There was tons of fiber, right? Laid all across the world. The .com bust happened, but what happened with that fiber? Smart individuals were able to pick up that utility for a cheap price and leverage that connectivity to create new products, new companies, and that's really when the innovation happened, right? I sit in an interesting seat because Align is a managed service provider, but the other side of our business is that we design and build data centers. Never in the history of our wildest dreams did we think that we'd be building so many AI-centric data centers as we are now. 24/7, 365 for the next many months. This is just happening for firms I can't divulge, but the cutting edge organizations of the world. The utility that's being built now, we've never witnessed this before, ever in the history of mankind. And it's going to provide a vector for good and bad to the world that's never been seen before. And just right at your fingertips for no cost. So, it's yes, it's scary. It's exciting. I say there's going to be a lot of great things that come out of AI. Breakthroughs in the medical field. Innovations at what we do from a day to day, from work to play to vacationing. It'll have every aspect will be touched, but it also creates a scary threat vector that I think that it's just starting to. They're just starting to get the scratch off and starting to see that star, and they're going to get that big prize, unfortunately.
Based on everything I've heard today, I have one last question for all four of you, and that is, how do you sleep at night? I mean,
on the positive side.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, after everything that we've heard here, it's like, why are you not pulling out your hair, trying to get ahead of all of this stuff, knowing that something's going to be coming around the corner?
Well,
whoops, sorry about that.
Bad question.
I'm right there. I'm not far behind you, but seriously, I mean, if you weren't awake about some of the threats that are out there after hearing what we've talked about today, you better wake up, because I mean, it's real, it's scary, and like I said, I don't know how you guys are sleeping at night comfortably, knowing all of this is out there.
Well, you can panic intelligently.
And I'm sure, Eldon, you've been in this industry for a long time. If you think about, you look back historically, yeah, this is a pivotal point, but we've had pivotal points like this, and it's just another thing that we need to overcome. And I think the most important part is the evangelist piece of being here and talking about it, right, is part of the not solving the problem, but the awareness piece. And I think at the very least, people need to be open-minded and understand and pragmatic, and not think of this as necessarily the world is ending, because it's not. We're very resilient. We will figure this out. Arguably this is just another, chapter in the industry of cybersecurity and regulatory compliance.
I think it's also important to have perspective. Everyone always thinks this generation's the laziest, this change is the worst, this global pandemic is the worst. I guarantee you go back and ask people about the Black Plague.
Yeah,
Cicero. They'll take COVID every day, right?
Yep.
Cicero said that, kids these days.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about technological evolution that's happened that has been terrible for information security, the internet is way worse than AI. I mean, banks were not connected before the internet. You needed to walk into a bank with a gun to rob it. Then somebody came along with the internet and you could do that remotely.
Right.
AI, maybe if we build robots with it, is just going to use the internet. So I'm not, overly concerned that AI is, good or bad for security. I mean, if we sat here and said, hey, let's just spend the next half hour and saying, how is AI going to help us be more secure? We would spend a day, not a half hour. And so it's really how you use it. And I think the point that is important for people to understand is you will get the outcome that you expect. right? If you think you're going to fail, you're going to fail. If you think you're going to use AI to massively improve, you have to have that mindset of this is going to be a good thing for us. We're going to look at all the positives. If you just try to hide and cower in the corner from AI, you're going to get the outcome you expect, right? And that's, to see people like James doing such good work and giving people the tools to have that confidence to say, hey, with this, I can manage my risk. I can let my people use these AI tools. I can put a committee together. We can govern this thing. We can go out and actually get an edge over our competitors, not because we're inventing some super app, but because we're running our business better.
Right. Because
our help desk, to our engineering staff, to our paralegals, to our, everybody can use AI in their own way and get 5% better. Right? That to me is the change that people aren't really talking about, is that, if every business gets 5% better, that change is enormous, right?
Absolutely.
Going back to your original question, how do we sleep at night? I'm a glass half full guy. I never have we had the ability at Align to put as much into innovation as we have today. I've been fortunate to know, the individuals at this table for over 20 years each. And, I talk to them, quite often. And I think generally speaking, all of us are quite positive and excited about the opportunity of innovation that's ahead of us. We've never had this before, right? Just look at some of the business problems that we've solved collectively over the past 20 years. Never have we been so well equipped and, to be able to attack today's challenges. And so for myself, I go to sleep thinking, oh, wow, I think we can actually do good with the tools that are out there. We can do a better job at protecting us with partners like that are sitting at this table. Or we can approach aspects of running day-to-day IT in a better manner. So, I just really believe that never has there been an opportunity, is what I'll use as the key word, that exists for organizations to be smarter, to be safer, and collaborate better, leveraging the tools that AI is producing. And we're not even 5% there, right? We're just getting into the batter's box. So
no, if I could, I'll give you a quick anecdote that is sort of how I think about this. This is a true story. I'll redact the names to keep people safe.
Protect the innocent.
So one day I'm in the office. They were talking about a turkey, how big a turkey was. And so the guy on the farm says, turkey's a big bird, right? Like it can be pretty vicious. And the guy says, yeah, I bet you turkey could even kill somebody. And so, the other guy was trying to be polite, and he said, I guess so. It's a big bird. And he's like, yeah, I would not want to mess with a turkey. And then, a guy comes walking down the hall, and he's hearing this. And you could just see his face changing to sort of bewilderment. What are they talking about? To sort of disgust. And he finally says, what are you talking about? If there's a turkey coming at me, it's Thanksgiving, right? And he just walks away. And I just cracked up, because I'm watching this whole thing, and there's truth to both sides of that. But I think about AI the same way. If you get panic-stricken about this, you work yourself up into a tizzy, yeah, I could see why people could imagine this terrible, terrible outcome. But the reality is, I'm with him. If it's me or the turkey, it's Thanksgiving every day.
Yep. No, I think that's fantastic. I appreciate that. And, it makes me feel good sitting here with the experts, listening to how you approach these things and how you have made our space a better place over the past 20 years. Thank you for that. And makes me feel a lot better because, obviously, you guys are the experts at all of this. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the input that everybody has provided. And with that, we'll kind of close things off. So thank you so much.
Thank you.